Hi, my name is Ken Asserson. I run the Microbiome prescription site, and this is a interesting microbiome to do analysis on. The analysis actually has implication for people with fibromyalgia because they could be suffering from the similar circumstance, not as a general rule, but fibromyalgia consists of several subsets, and this may particularly apply to one subset. We are dealing with the case of unknown pain, originally at the beginning localized to one area and then expand, and it becomes a interesting ongoing challenge with this one. So let's go through and see what I could find. Is basically dealing with somebody with very complicated history, which unfortunately is too often the case. And let's see what we know. Person is female, 30 to 40, which of course fits many people with fibromyalgia. Was a teenage vegetarian, happens to also be European, which means being vegetarian was an ideological choice, and the person's DNA, probably going back 10 generations or 20 generations, was probably never have been a vegetarian. That means that the microbiome is probably not particularly suited for being a vegetarian, which means that there's a good risk doing an ideological correct thing of being a vegetarian has cascaded the microbiome in the wrong direction. Not true for example, people from India, where often we're talking about 20 generations of vegetarian, and their microbiome is absolutely adapted for being full-time vegetarians and would have a horrible time with a meat-based diet. Coincidental with becoming a vegetarian was person developed heavy insomnia and depression. They may or may not be connected one with the other, but it's a possibility of the choice to become vegetarian and ending up with depression as a secondary or tertiary side effect must be at least recognized as a possibility. Person had herpes virus and it took longer than average to recover, which is okay. That's just an interesting side fact, but actually we find later on we may have explanation from the microbiome. Has a high stress life, family, business, education, love life, you name it. High stress life, we know alters the microbiome, or we know it alters it significantly. Getting the stress out of your life is definitely something which should be attempted. If it means running away to the mountains and joining a commune, that may actually be a reasonable, healthy response. There's other ways of doing it. I know I have had to deal with stress, and I tend to deal with stress proactively, which means sometimes becoming a little bit blunt, because long-term constant stress is a lot worse than having a stress blow up and it's done. Long-term constant stress causes the microbiome to shift. A quick response that ends the source of stress, even if it means no longer being friendly with a person or having contact with them, doesn't affect the microbiome as much. So getting aggressive dealing with sources of stress is something which I would advocate if you have microbiome problems, is something you may want to retrain yourself in doing, because it is actually your own choice often. 10 years ago, a person had bronchitis, which was left untreated for a month. Assistant has had chronic bronchitis. I empathize. One might diagnosis early was chronic walking pneumonia and distinctive cough afterwards. Often happens with a lot of people with chronic fatigue syndrome. They end up with a chronic fatigue cough. The reason for the cough, I believe, is probably a microbiome shift, which never corrects itself, but it does end up reducing the cough, even if the person on lab test turns out to be bronchitis bacteria negative or walking pneumonia negative or whatever. The problem is the microbiome hasn't recovered. So you have the symptom being persistent, but not due to the infection being there, but that how the infection terraformed the gut became ongoing. 1 year ago, Lyme and other infections were detected. Lyme is one of these areas which I often says, okay, be careful. If you ever had Epstein-Barr and your immune system or microbiome is jacked, most of the Lyme tests will come back with a false positive. Doesn't mean you don't have it, but there's a good chance it's a false positive. However, the good news is that the typical treatment of antibiotics often helps the microbiome. For example, microcycline and Zifamax are ones which I've taken as part of the chronic fatigue syndrome protocol. So it definitely helps. In this case, the infections declined, which means part of the immune system recovered, symptoms did not, which would imply that it would suggest furthermore that it may be a false positive, and the false positive could simply be because the immune system wasn't able to fully suppress whatever was being Epstein-Barr particularly to prevent a false positive. The pain originated in the pelvis area, and it was of an unknown origin. Conventional medicine suspected a condition. They actually found that was true. It was treated, verified 100% treated, and did not resolve it. So we had a abnormal growth showing up. Abnormal growth can happen for a variety of reasons, including too much or too little of certain enzymes to keep systems in balance. Remember, the whole body system works off chemical signals and chemical availability. Too much of one thing will cause something to proliferate, or absence of it may cause a response, a difference response, because something isn't being kept in control. Worst case scenario is, of course, cancerous. So, this person's main or dominant characteristic is pain. Dominant as in what is, if asked, number one, top of the hierarchy for our hierarchy of symptoms. Basically, painkiller resistant, opiate reduced it by about 10%, but the existing issues with insomnia became far more acute, which means it's basically almost a washout. It's not enough benefit to take the side effects. Interestingly, is reaction increased extremely quickly in response to stress. Stress generally means a different set of chemicals being pumped into the body. The body responds by changing the chemical production from the microbiome. The chemical production gets into the body quickly, and in this case, the pain increase. So whatever is the root cause of it is causing the pain levels to goes up, which means, in terms of the model I'm using, is metabolites are causing the pain, or could be causing the pain. Again, it's partially speculation, but there's enough things that I suspect it is a viable path to explore. Pain spreads to joints, sometimes to muscles, sometimes to the whole body. Hey, that sounds like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, other characteristics. Those two we know are microbiome shifts. So it again suggests, because it fits the general pattern we see with other conditions of stress inducing the system type of response, implies the microbiome is involved. Sauna helps to some degree. Again, we have the same thing with chronic fatigue syndromes. Saunas do help ameliorate symptoms, and there's a variety of studies on PubMed showing that. So again, the microbiome is suggested strongly as being a viable factor to consider. Increase blood flow to the pelvic area, be it from getting aroused or walking faster than usual, causes the pain to increase. Okay, basically, both of which I know causes the microbiome to shift, and it may be hormonal related, which could be, of course, tied to being female, or it could be some other process. Exact ones I'm not about to speculate on. All we'll do is it's consistent with patterns which have been seen in the literature. Now, we do have an improvement happening, and this is interesting. The improvement was a particular probiotic, live spore, which consists of 2 probiotics, both bacillus, and both of them caused improvements. And a few months stayed long as she was taking it. She stopped taking it and came back to how it originally was. So that tends to really make it clear that the microbiome is involved, because this was a little bit on one side unexpected. It's interesting to note that this is a liquid probiotic, which is like Semaphore 1, Semaphore 2. It is how Europeans often take probiotics, not encapsulated, but as a liquid form. And personally, I have suspicions that it is probably the wiser way of taking it. I take custom probiotics, and I do it in liquid form. It basically dissolves it in a glass of warm water and then drink it. And the reason I believe it's probably the wisest way of doing it is very simple. It goes into the mouth, it will alter the mouth, alter the whole system going down. The catch is the mouth and the systems going down repopulates the guts. So if you don't deal with those areas, guess what? It's going to be temporary relief because they're going to get repopulated. Alternatively, going through the passage, there's a chance that it could take care of the reserves of the undesirable probiotics, or undesired bacteria, and gives your gut a better chance of normalizing. So what we have is we have experience showing that the gut is very likely involved. So let's go on. We have her microbiome report uploaded to my site, which is what I'm going to go through. I should remind people this is an academic exploration. I am not a medical professional, or more important, a licensed medical professional. I'm a data scientist. Used to be a high school science teacher one time. I've taught artificial intelligence to university, blah, 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 blah. I'm a clever guy, blah. I was in enrichment classes in high school, etc. But I'm not a licensed medical professional. In fact, I was told not to be, because I'm too creative for thinking and would probably quickly get in trouble with medical groups, because I think logically and don't pay much attention to social norms. And in medicine, those are medical dogma tends to be a major challenge. So, word of caution: this is an academic one. Your suggestions should be reviewed by a licensed professional medical person before doing so. Usual disclaimer to keep me out of trouble. And also, it's good advice because sometimes there can be secondary conditions or factors which my analysis I'm not aware of, or even if it was, I have no clinical experience to reference, to put around for references or considerations. So, usual caveats stated, emphatically see a professional after considering the things. First, we're going to look at outliers with the new tools, and the idea is to build up understanding or model of what's going on so that we can figure out what to do. My training is in academic modeling and science, very rigorous stuff, and the purpose of a model is to make predictions. The purpose of the predictions is to have something testable so you can find out if the model works or not. Very simple thing. So model makes prediction, but it's very important that they make testable predictions. And give me a second, I have a barking dog to put out. Dog has been put outside. Of course, you may still hear the dogs barking in the background. We've got 3 Welsh Pembroke corgis. They're gems, but they are loud mouths. So, in terms of rigorous academic training, not medicine training, but academic training coming from sciences like physics and chemistry, build a model, and you want the model to be able to produce testable predictions. Then you try the predictions, and if they work, you have more confidence in the model. If they don't work at all, you know you need to go and redo your model. If they sort of work, you want to go back and figure out what you missed in the model so that you are going to be more successful with your predictions, which are testable. Keyword is always testable. Often in medicine, I find there are predictions, but the predictions are not testable. It's, oh, I think it's this. Okay, how do you test it? I have no idea. Being trained in physical sciences and rigorous mathematics, I said, folks, you need to stop your random speculation and get back to standard scientific methods. The science of medicine, not the art of medicine. Okay, so going back to the presentation, we could next look at suggestions for food and prescriptions from it. And we also have, from the person, we have DNA reports from live well gene variations. I've used that. It's interesting. Most of the time, it has limited benefit. 2 reasons. One is the information coming back from Livalo doesn't usually indicate probability of it having the conditions. It's just saying, oh, this was reported in some studies of being more significant than that, and it just does a raw data dump without providing context. 2, DNA is hard to change, which means that it's not as actionable as the microbiome is. So we have it there. If during the investigation I find something of interest, I will go back to this and see if it's a part of the puzzle. If it's not, I would probably largely ignore the report. It's interesting, it's nice, but it's not. The one thing I do notice is that the number of items connected with methylation is it's not particularly high, but there's a number of them there. And methylation issues are well known to be common with chronic fatigue syndrome. I believe it's also common with fibromyalgia, although I would need to recheck that. So the fact that there are so many of these variations showing up in the DNA of this person suggests that we are in, although this person doesn't fit either of those clinical definitions, we are somewhere in the general ballpark area. Okay, the next item is I went over to do predictive symptoms. First of all, many, if any, matches was not expected. I was not expecting it. Why? Because the person's symptoms and characteristics are not on the symptom list, and they are generally atypical from other uploads. So I don't expect the ability to find matches to happen there. 2 items did seem to match, or 2 of which were of interest. One was panic attacks, and that tends to indicate stress sensitivity, which we know from the report of the person is there. If we go and take a look at the bacteria associated with panic attack, only one it was 100% match, by the way. Everything was low for different bacteria. The Protella was high, which was about the only thing you can really do great amount of stuff on, is you could reduce that. Generalized pain, again, we have a pain symptoms. Lactobacillus and Bacteria are high. Everything else was low, especially the phylum and tissue bacteria. Again, not something which jumps out, but something which we could consider when we're looking at trying to deal with diet changes. So it just simply indicates where the nature of the problem is. So predictive symptoms didn't have anything jumping out of there. What did the rest of the items that came out as being typically things seen with chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia, which means that, okay, so you have some overlap. You're in a general ballpark area, but that's it. The ability to distinguish is based strictly on what people have uploaded and the number of people who've uploaded with particular symptoms. Again, this is tend to be an oddball edge case, hence my going through and doing this analysis, because other people may also suffering from the same scenario of not quite fitting into any nice medical box. The next thing was very simple, going over to the KEGG outliers. Now I'm going to hop over to just show you where it is for those who are interested in following along with young samples. Here we have the microbiome side. We have login. We see 2 samples there. And what we do is we have to have the KEGG molecular enzymes outlier, medical conditions, etc. So I'm going to not worry too much about some of these. I'm going to just dive directly into the first item being KEGG modulars, then we're going to enzymes, and then we're going to products. So we just click that, simple as that, and voila, we have it, and we have a total of 5 items being there. If you look on the far right side, you see everything is low, or my usual way to see, okay, or anything high is click here, click 2 times. If everything stays 0, then the problem is everything is low. In this case, this is what we have. So with that said, let's go back. And what we find is in one of which I noticed right away, which was lysine. And if you remember from the beginning, the characteristic she had was slow recovery from a herpes virus, or from a virus, forget which type, doesn't really matter. What we have here is we have low production of lysine. Lysine is an amino acid. In other words, she has a long recovery. It is possible that the reason for the long recovery was because the body was not producing very much lysine. It means also that lysine, which is available as a supplement, may be something she wants to add in and see if that causes any improvement of symptoms. We have some other things here going around, and most of these stuffs are, you end up going into what I call the search across the internet looking for there. So let's go and let me go and do it a little bit smoother. So I'm back on the website. There I'm going to copy one of the terms, and I'm actually going to just take the word meridium and pain, search to see if there are any aspect, and what we have is we have all sorts of things. So I'm going to actually incorporate a bit more to it. We have a bunch of articles here, and now we end up having to say, okay, what? And what we end up doing is having to go down what I call the the great quest for the holy knowledge. For example, if I go over here and we have a bunch of things dealing with overexpression, and what we go through is we end up with a ton of articles, most of which may not be relevant. We hope by including the word pain, we have found it. And in this case, when we go to the page being linked to, the word pain isn't there, so Google search failed us, or should say there's a good chance that what we're looking for doesn't currently exist, hasn't been researched for whatever reasons, and there. So this is what I call the long search. We can identify factors which are abnormal. Understanding their significance is a second question, and that often a nastier question, because it depends on whether or not those factors are being studied by anybody, or somebody stumbled across them and found a group. Often the result is zippo. We don't find anything. We could go in and we can go in, and I usually would suggest we do that. Let's go and take a look at that one, and we just go and open it in a new tab. That will take us to the KEGG site, and we end up getting some information there, which takes us over to a page. However, what we have, this is what we are looking at. We know it's low. What are the outcomes from it? Those are those two things: fumate and hydroquinone. So we can click that, and it gives us more information if we have more information. In this case, we really don't have much. Or we can click on this one, and we have more. And sometimes you will find information there. We could go and take something like fumate, go over here and try our Google search. Again, we're using the word pain because that's the dominant symptom. Voila, the very first one. Peripheral neuropathic pain. In rodents, well, she's not a rat, but again, inhibits pain behavior. So we find that what the consequence of the reaction, which is fumate, which, because cis is lower, means that we're getting less fumate, is connected with pain. So we now see, okay, so there is a connectivity of this particular process that tracks over to pain. Again, it's a slow process. It's what you end up spending a weekend or 2 weekends wading through. Make sure you take notes, open up Excel, start writing extensive notes. Don't try keeping in your head. The amount of information cascades so quickly that you will be saturated and will forget what you've discovered. Okay, so we have gone and wandered into here. We have 5 items. Same process should be done for each one of those 5, but the person I'm only illustrating the process, which is to click on, takes you to KEGG, gives you information. Like go here, rubidium, if you go there, and we see that it is part of a long cascade, so you end up going to each one of the cascade and trying to get understanding of what's going on and what impacts it. Some cases will be tied to pain, other cases something else. If you have multiple symptoms, you will find often you will track something down. Again, it's going here to get the details. Google search, putting the magical chemical gobbledygook or name, or nomenclature, and symptoms, and seeing if we have any known medical research knowledge on their connectivity. Okay, so we did find one thing of interest, lysine as a possible product or supplement, which is available as a supplement, which could have positive effects because the levels are low, very low, 1.4 percentile. All these numbers are ugly low. So that's step one. Step two, we move over to our old friend, the enzymes. Remember, enzymes are being produced by the bacteria in your gut. And what we are trying to do is identify any imbalances of enzymes being produced. Too much or too little. We click that, and we have all of the lists there. And actually, I'll clip this up to 100. And the reason is we have 72 enzymes. And I'm going to do over here, I'm going to click high. If we have any high count will show up right here at the top. Every single thing is low. In other words, we don't have enough enzymes being produced, which means that all the body systems are out of kilter. Now, one nice aspect using data from KEGG is we can actually, using KEGG and doing some reverse engineering back and forth, come up with bacteria which will produce that, and those bacteria happens to be available in commercial probiotics. So we may be able to substitute probiotics for missing enzymes. This was done for you quite nicely. Just click the button. You will have to wait a few minutes. It did have a large number of missing enzymes because there's a ton of calculation it has to do for every single enzyme, cross-referencing, etc., etc. Hopefully, after a reasonable length of time, you get results. First at the top, it lists all the enzymes which are included, and that's done so that if you print a page out, you have available for reference, perhaps to use for discussions with the MD. He may be slightly impressed, dumbfounded, or whatever. And down below we have a variety of items here, 25 items. So we'll flip over and see all of them. Now, we did have the report of one particular combination of probiotics had a major positive effect. I went and checked the database to see if either of those probiotics we have the genes from it in order to be able to calculate if they produce enzyme. Unfortunately, neither of them are included in the KEGG database, which is unfortunate because the impact of them is not known. However, we do have some things here. We find some of the bacillus, which are related, and they have pretty good numbers, 52. Remember, we have something like 72 missing. We have 52 being produced with some of the bacillus. But if we just click this, we go from the low to high, which is nice, but we now go from the high to low. And we have Colostrum pretericum being very high, 63 out of 72. In other words, this one produces a ton of the missing enzymes. My usual source for it is Mirarisum, which comes out of Japan, and it is just this one particular probiotic, to the best of my memory. But we have some other ones. All of those are available in probiotics somewhere in the world. However, many of them are available only in mixtures. Enterococcus here is 31. That's another probiotic which is available in Europe. And then we have the Bifidobacterium. And notice all the Bifidobacterium are relatively low. And if we go down to Lactobacillus, they are even poorer hits. So we have the ability to see which probiotics are particularly suitable for this person. And we see the Bifidobacteria and Lactobacillus in terms of supplementing with the enzymes that they are missing is relatively poor choice. We do find Colostrum Pretericum sitting there as a sweet one. And the two which you did take are not, unfortunately, in the database, so we don't know what their scores would be. Again, we only can work from what is published, and it's not published, it's not on KEGG at the moment. If it gets added to KEGG next week, I'd be real happy. I'll update the data from KEGG. Okay, so we now have determined some of the probiotics that should be done. So let's hop back to the chart we have there, and the summary which just says, say, 72 items, every one was low. Generally, having low enzymes tends to be a problem because enzymes have been produced by so many different bacteria. How in the world do you figure out which ones you adjust to? There are missing items. If it was a supplement or a particular end product, we may be able to find it as a supplement. However, enzymes are not packaged for retail sales in the same manner. We do have them by probiotics, and you can see the list there, and basically you have the best candidates at the top, and you can go down from there. The ones that they were using are not in the list. The fact that we have all of the bacillus are all sitting at 52. My gut feeling is that if they were in the database, they would be sitting about the same level 52. And the Pretericum does better. In fact, taking the two of them together, you may or may not get lucky. They may not be 100% overlap between these two. If there's not 100% overlap, then your final number will be even higher. But it indicates that, yes, the solution they have is what it should continue taking, but also add in the Colostrum Pretericum, which should have as equal, if not greater, impact, and also it may be a bit cheaper. Next one which we go over to is end products, and again, let's take a look at where it is, just for those of you who are wanting to follow along. It's sitting there, and we have KEGG products or end products. I changed the name to products just because there's an old section I had which was roughly done and from incomplete data sources called end products. So I renamed it as KEGG products. And again, we have a whole bunch of things which we're low in. We can hit here 2 times to see if there are any items we are high, and nothing. Everything is low, so we are deficient in it. So now we go, and in time, some of these will have the word supplement after it. Right now, a colleague is working on creating a big list of all of these items which are available with supplements, with links to where you can get supplements from. But going through the list, there are 3 items which I spotted, which I know are available supplements. Ubiquinol, Ubiquinol-N is where the deficiency was identified. Whether or not they are the same or not is something to be explored. The ribose, we have an exact match. Site 2, I'm not sure what the meaning is. You have to go to KEGG to get the technical details. And we do have that available as a bulk supplement on Amazon and other places. And we have the orphanine. We have L-orphanine available. Now, here is where it becomes a bit question whether or not one is effective substitution for the other. Ideally, it should be D-orphanine, like for D-ribose, and the D and L indicate something about how the physical structure of the chemical is put together. Is it left-handed or is it right-handed? D for a draught for right-handed, left for the other way. So they may or may not be a true substitution. But the best way to do it is simply to try it and see if it makes an improvement. And remember, when you try these things, Do them one at a time and not hit them massively at one time. You want to try it for one thing. My usual suggestion is for a week and see if there are any change. You do need to try figuring out some way of getting objective measurements so that you know whether or not it done. Cognitive issues and other factors can play havoc in finding the right combination of supplements to help. But we have at least 3 items there which can be done. One is a precise match, one is a probable match, one is a speculative match. So we have 3 items sitting from the microbiome analysis. Where are we now? We have a model of a cause. And this appears to be not a condition of overproduction, but underproduction. Underproduction is a much more challenging item to address. We have a shortage of enzymes, which means resulting end products. I do not have an algorithm written yet. It's a good suggestion for something I should start working on, and it's going to be a nightmare, which is probably why I'm somewhat avoiding thinking about it. I'm working from enzyme deficiencies or end product deficiencies and trying to create suggestions there. It's having to do double inferences, which gets me further away from high confidence levels, but it's something I will put in my back burner. Ultimate cause is the lack of appropriate bacteria. The penultimate is a shortage of enzymes being produced and the resulting end products. So we can trace back, and the original causes is the bacteria mixture, which by being, for example, a vegetarian, by being on antibiotics, by bad diet sometimes earlier in life, could all be part of the causalities. We don't know if it is or not. All we know is that the association with those type of decisions or changes has association with microbiome shift. Whether or not it's a causality, we don't know. We only go talking about association. Long term, the probiotics identified and the enzymes and end products being added could conceptually cascade into the correction. I'll say conceptually cascade is because once the environment becomes friendlier by having the right enzymes going around and the right end products, often bacteria will recover and stabilize in a new system because they're able to be fed and they're able to send signals, and we get all the manufacturing going on. Right now, my perception of this microbiome is it looks like Germany in 1945 after being blitz bombed by the Americans and the British and Canadians, factories destroyed, etc. You start bringing in the right type of stuff, new machines, other things, and rebuilding the factory, and suddenly the economy may take up again, which is what happened with the German economy, the so-called Marshall Plan. So this is somewhat of a Marshall Plan approach, which is to supplement with the probiotics and the enzymes and the end products which are missing, and that will hopefully stabilize the economy, the country, to be a suitable situation. It worked for Germany with the Marshall Plan. Let's hope it works for this person. Soil-based general probiotics equilibrium prescription seems like a plausible suggestion, and 2 reasons. One is some of the items on the list of probiotic substitutions are in those things. So they may well provide some of the missing enzymes, which ones they do or don't provide means having to grind through a lot of pages of data to sort that out. I'll leave that to whoever really wants to walk that path. Data is there, just a matter of being very time consuming to go through it. I do have an old saying, which is somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but at the same time it has some accuracy in it, is a spoonful of organic natural soil may be part of the solution. Alternatively, it's going out into forest, which has not been sprayed chemically, and just chewing on forest leaves and berries. Please make sure they're the safe ones. Chewing on poison ivy is not a recommended thing. Eating hemlock berries is not a very recommended thing. So make sure it's safe and you're knowledgeable before you attempt to do it. My father, when I used to walk with him, he would always pick grass from the fields and chew on it. And the bacillus, which is in a probiotic, which they use to success, is sometimes is referred to as a grass bacillus because it is common on grains and wheat, etc. So go out in the fields. If you go out and hike in the countryside where they have fields of grains, pick a few stalks and chew on them and suck on them, and get your probiotics from a natural source. Nice and simple. Been done for a millennium, and no major health risks that I'm aware of. Okay, so we've come to the end of the usual analysis. Now we're going to flip over into diet changes. For this, given that the nature of the problem is absence of enzymes, diet changes I would deem to be secondary because they are not as focused as working from the enzymes and the product, etc. I need to try developing algorithms to make them focused in that direction, but at the moment they're not. So let's go over and take a look regardless, just for the sake of completeness. So we're back on the page, and what we're going to do is we're going to go down to advanced suggestions. We could try quick suggestions too. In fact, let's probably do quick suggestions too. And quick suggestions come up with the things. One of the interesting at the top was vitamin D, barley, cyprium, etc. So those are there. We have Bifidobacterium, which I think was on the enzyme list. I have to go back and check. Barley licorice, etc. A lot of these things are what I recognize as being very common occurrences of chronic fatigue syndrome recommendation. We have other things here to avoid. And something here which would be curious to see if it's on the list, may not have been. So we have the conventional list there. Now, what we want to do, or what I want to explore, is go over to custom suggestions. And what we're going to do is go for high and the low, higher level, no restrictions, etc. Over there, I'm going to include drugs and non-drugs. I'm not going to include antibiotics at the moment. I'll do miscellaneous, not classified. And we're just going to see what comes up. We have some overlap. We have inulin sitting there, which was on the other list. And we have a variety of things, rosemary, soy. So those are things to consider taking. Again, given that the nature of the analysis showed that it was underproduction of enzyme, which depends very much on quieter bacteria, it ends up being, relatively speaking, it makes diet changes relatively lower priority, rather than getting basically the appropriate probiotics and supplements in based on the shortage of production of the end products and the enzyme. my suggestion would be after 4 weeks at least, preferably 8 weeks, getting those supplements and probiotics into you, is to go and do another microbiome sample, same source ideally, and seeing what the changes are. And then come back and do analysis from there. By the moment the this altered bacteria, and what I probably should do is add in options for picking only low bacteria, trying to encourage the growth of those rather than low or high. It becomes a slightly different problem, but in this case, because of the low level of all the enzymes, it is a rational way of filtering, and I haven't implemented it, and hopefully in the next week or so I'll go and implement that option of just doing low bacteria. Because the low bacteria means low amount of enzymes, and that is the predominant factor with this particular person. Okay, I think I've talked enough for the moment. I got a bunch of suggestions to try making the site better, and basically I'm curious to see what the result is on this person, and hopefully there'll be a follow-up to this presentation in 4 to 6 weeks, or 8 weeks, or 10 weeks, as the case may be.